Hello and welcome back to the Monarch Metamorphosis podcast. This is episode 9, and today my guest is Marc Macaluso of TMW Longevity Supplements, or TMW Longevity for short. Super excited to have you here. Full disclosure for people that have been watching, yes, I'm 13 pounds lighter than the last time you saw me because I got back from my first vacation in 3 years and I was punished. And I was thinking about you guys because I was like, damn, I wish I had your supplement with me so at least I could get some sort of vitamins or something in my system. And then I was thinking about maybe liposomal charcoal at some point, but we can talk about that later because I was in bad shape after I got food poisoning last week in Mexico. But that is not the purpose of this podcast. Super excited to have you today because one of the things that we talk about with Monarch within our membership and then beyond is supplementation. Everyone is obsessed with supplements. And even in my career through medicine, it's been one of those things where 15 years ago, GNC was kind of the name of the game. Vitamin Shop was the name of the game. No one really knew anything. Now all of a sudden it's not only injectables, but then you have topicals and the supplement world has increased exponentially. So I'm excited to have you because one of the things that I get frustrated by, and hopefully you'll be able to answer some questions for me as we progress, just kind of how do people figure out what is going to be the best course for them in terms of supplementation? What are the things that you need to look for if you're buying a supplement? Because ultimately, it's my belief and our practice that supplements are meant to supplement something. And I think we've kind of gone off course in the sense that, people are trying to counteract lifestyle, which is a daily impact on their well-being, with a myriad of different capsules, gummies, and things like that. And I've told patients, if we had something that was going to actually help you live for a very long time, we probably would have discovered it right by now, or we will discover it relatively soon. So my goal from today, and hopefully you'll educate a lot of people listening, is, not only about your product, but also just the industry in general, in terms of how do we correct course and hopefully help people, if they are going to go down the supplement path, which is absolutely necessary at times, that they're getting the most for their investment. So as a founder myself, I love to hear people's stories. So I'd love to know how you got into this moment as the founder of TMW Longevity and start from there.
Sure. Thanks for having me. The quick story, it's actually a long story. I can go the quick short route. Is in 2018, I wanted to start a CPG company with a friend of mine, a guy named Greg Steltenpaul, who is the founder of Odwalla and Calafia Farms. He's a close friend and mentor. And I wanted to do a mushroom company with him, functional mushrooms. Nice. This was at the nascent phase of that. Mudwater wasn't really on the map. You had seen Four Stigmatic in some stores. And we both just felt that mushrooms were kind of part of the future of food. And long story short, COVID hit and Greg ended up passing away a year later. Bummer. And the project, passed away with him in a sense. And then fast forward a month later, I ended up meeting the woman I just married last week.
Congratulations again.
Thank you. Yeah, Sarah. And honestly, it was that relationship that completely changed my life. Because as we were talking before this podcast started, I got married later in life. Yeah. And meeting her was honestly, it was the person I've always been looking for. It was all of a sudden she appeared. And that completely changed my perspective on health and on my own longevity. So in 2022, after we dated for 6 months and I knew what this relationship was, I started focusing on longevity for myself. I like to research, I like to, and I started studying longevity science and where, the literature was at that point. And at the same time, I was a film writer and I wanted to, again, build an income stream and build a consumer company. I started thinking about the company I was going to do with Greg. By the end of the year, the the mushroom company became a longevity company.
Nice.
And it was mostly due to macro demographics.
Yeah.
So you study the macro demographics of this century, and it's like incredibly interesting in the sense that it's unique in human history, where we have plummeting birth rates and rising lifespans. And the combination of this is going to create deficits in society, for society to be able to support itself.
Correct.
Right? Which means that all of us need to live healthier for longer in order to even support society, our families, our communities. And that's interesting. That to me was something I can really wrap my head around and could inspire, building, I can build something off of that. So with that insight and a year of research, I decided to launch the company. Got small investment, and the initial goal was, okay, what do I want to take on a daily basis that could actually sustain my health in the right way, and give my body kind of what it needs to support itself with energy, cellular health, etc., mental health, cardiovascular health. And I spent a year, more than a year and a half, formulating the product, and then learning about liposomal technology. And we own our own liposomal technology, and getting into the nitty-gritty of that, and basically birthed our first product, which is Essential Longevity, which is the first multivitamin that's liposomal, formulated for longevity.
So go into, because I know what liposomal is, and I think people listening may have heard the term before, but for them, just because I think it's interesting, how did you land on liposomal versus capsule or tablet? And I'm also interested personally, when you say your own liposomal technology, because I know the guys from Symbiotica, and I think they've kind of created awareness, I should say, around kind of the liposomal movement, especially in commercial products. So first and foremost, what is, if you're willing to talk about it, what is the technology specifically that differentiates, and also why liposomal versus a different route?
Sure. Well, one is, especially because the company was founded on me sincerely approaching my health differently. I'm not going to cut corners on that for myself. Yeah. And so I approached it very seriously as far as understanding what is the best out there I can find for myself. And once I came across the knowledge of liposomes, to have that knowledge and keep it for myself, but to come to market with a cheaper product just doesn't align.
Right.
It's, to me, there's a great challenge in doing the best things for other people, and then trying to find a way to make it affordable or make the business work. That's a challenge that I like. And so liposomes, just as a quick overview, it's essentially phospholipids, which is fat cells, come from soy or sunflower. Ours come from sunflower. And through a process of manufacturing, they basically create a protective ring around the ingredients. So let's say you have a vitamin C, which is a water-soluble ingredient. The liposomes, the phospholipids will create a chain around that vitamin C, which allows it to pass through the stomach with greater protection versus being destroyed by stomach acids or bile. And the composition of it then goes into the small intestine, and it helps it to bind to the mucous membrane of the small intestine, which will then slip through the mucous membrane and then into your body with maximum absorption. That's the ideal pathway of a liposome. Sure. So what make liposomes different in that, and what makes ours a little bit different, is that pharmacologically, you can just take a lecithin, right? Almost all phospholipids come from lecithin. And if you just take a lecithin, it has about 20% concentration of phosphatidylcholine. Phosphatidylcholine is the main phospholipid to create the liposomes. At 20% concentration, it's not pharmacologically considered a liposome, even though it's marketed as such. Yeah. It's actually just a lipid bilayer. It's a monolipid bilayer. So what we did is we actually take high concentration phosphatidylcholine, which actually pharmacologically qualifies us as real liposomes, and it creates a double encapsulation. So you have a chain of encapsulation around the ingredients, which really creates it allows it to fully do the job it's supposed to do. Plus, even when it's sitting in the sachets like ours are liquid, when it sits in these individual sachets, if it's a monolipid bilayer, it will dissolve over time. Most likely, it will break apart. Yeah. Whereas ours will not break apart over time. We've looked under microscopes after 13, 14 months, and it's still there.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
And that leads me to my next question. Before I want to kind of get into how you picked what you picked for this daily longevity supplement. But the one thing personally that I have a hard time with in terms of the supplement space. One is efficacy, right? And, I personally will tell patients, like, if you can go straight into a vein, that's great. If you can go into muscle, that's awesome. Transdermal, usually pretty good. But when it comes to oral, that's when we kind of have an issue, which is capsules, tablets, which are the traditional methods.
Right.
Because of what you said, which is, do you take it regularly? Does it get through the stomach acid in the same structure that it is intended to, so that when it gets to the small intestine, it makes it across? No one necessarily spends the time or money to measure that. And then from a liver standpoint, like, what makes it through the first pass effect? And for people listening, it's like anything that you consume, once it's absorbed, whatever percentage is absorbed, it goes straight to the liver and then it gets processed.
Right.
And pharmaceutical companies spend a lot of money trying to figure out what dose ingested will lead to the effective dose that they're hoping to achieve circulating in your system, which is why many people, when they, someone says Tylenol works for me, someone says Tylenol doesn't work for me. Yeah. Like, Tylenol works. The question is how are you administering it? What is your, do you take Tums? Are you taking antacids? Yeah. Which, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of factors that go in. So, for you guys, especially as like a newer company, what was it like in the development process to get to the point where you're like, we have pretty strong belief that if we use this technology that's proprietary to you guys, your beta glucans, the various different vitamins and minerals that you have in your product, like, what is that process like in terms of trying to understand what's actually going to make it into your system, so that it can hopefully yield the potential effect that you're looking for? Right.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I totally agree with the pills and the powders. I mean, it's proven that only 20 to 15% or so, 20 to 10% of powders actually make it into the body.
Totally.
It's just wasted money, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's for two reasons. One is the form factor, is that powders are just really weak. They're very exposed in the body and they get destroyed easily. The second one is that, especially supplements in powder form, like it's overdosed.
Totally.
And so one of the key things is like less is more, and quality over quantity. These are just core values of the company.
Yeah.
So if you want to get vitamin C into the body, like, you don't give like 3,000 milligrams of it.
Right.
It's just the body will end up rejecting it and rejecting probably other things that it needs. So I think the key with us was, especially because we're liposomal, which means you need less of an ingredient to capture like the full impact of it and the full absorption, is keeping doses at like a very, like moderate level, right? So our vitamin D is only 2% DV. The B12 is 2% daily recommended value. The vitamin C is 300 milligrams. And then we have, functional mushrooms, where our beta glucans come from. We have niacin at only, 100% daily recommended value.
Yeah.
So we're doing things at a moderate level, but we're also sourcing like the highest quality ingredients, which is why we're more costly.
Sure.
Right? So we're spending money on even things like our hyaluronic acid, for example, right? So we're using sodium hyaluronate. This is also like things that kill me about the supplement business is, sodium hyaluronate is a tremendous molecule. It's usually taken topically. So in oral form, it's completely unabsorbable in its normal molecular weight. So what we did was we sourced an ultra low molecular weight sodium hyaluronate. It's the only form that's absorbable orally, and we put it in there. Like, the cost difference is huge. It's like 8x the price.
Sure.
And same with vitamin D. Like, for me, like, if I see a company selling vitamin D in powder form, I don't take them seriously.
Can't.
Right? You can't, right? Because it's oil soluble. If you're not mixing it, dissolving in oils, like, it's just not working, right? So to me, as I got deeper into the science, I didn't know half of this stuff when I started, but I learned it. And to learn those things and then to still come out with an inferior product, to me just feels, okay, you're not serious. You're just, in the business of making money.
Yeah, 100%. And like early days. So the reason we don't have our own line of supplements, and I won't name them, but like, there are some big brands that are, to your point, just like very much going about making money by white labeling a supplement. And they're using brand equity to say, hey, like, you trust us, you should trust the supplements. And the reason we haven't done that with Monarch is because I, saw the dark underbelly of the market, where I realized like everyone's getting their supplements from certain manufacturers.
Right.
Quality control is pretty poor, and you're just putting your own unique label. And as you've been speaking, like, one of the reasons why I like you and I do like the supplement, and took it for, you sent me a box, which was great. Cinnamon, by the way, sneaky how much cinnamon's in there.
Yeah, the next we're in the middle of right now our next production run.
Yeah,
it's a drop lower. So everything's a little bit more balanced. Like we're
It's all
treating this
good.
like software. It's like it's
totally
constant like upgrades.
You should see our first club. It looks way different than this one. But like as you've been talking, like I realized it is in complete non-alignment with how I want to live, how I want Monarch to continue to grow. If we just, slap a label on something, right, and, you can't really trust what's in it, where it's coming from. Right. And you also said something that I resonate with often, or I resonate with a lot and say often, which is like, just the answer is always simple. Like you don't need to pack 100 different vitamins or minerals in something. Like, first of all, who knows if they're actually in there? There's a space issue. Second of all, like, when you're hitting yourself with those high concentrations all the time, the body has a natural intelligence. And then the other part, which is where I'm excited to see what happens with our membership, is like, is anything actually changing, right? Like, you are familiar with and a fan of like the 4 horsemen of health, right? Yeah. Metabolic disease, heart disease, inflammation, things like that. So is this actually, in someone who has evidence, like making a meaningful change? Obviously, like this should be used in synergy with better diet, improved life, like all the things that we talk about all the time. And that's where the blood work that we do becomes valuable, because like we can actually track objectively as well as their subjective response too, which is super exciting. I had another question as you were talking, like, when you're formulating the liposome, like how do you know that each actual liposome has the concentration that you're hoping for? Like where, what I'm saying? Like, well, it's like, it's relatively easy to like take a powder and, you put it in a capsule, but like, what does the quality control look like to ensure that in each of these, monolipid bilayer compounds that you're getting what you're hoping to get? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it starts with the ingredient, right? So the phosphatidylcholine that we source, it's a much higher concentration than just lecithin. Okay. Right. So like, just in the quality in the ingredient, that you're going to have the potentiality to create a full encapsulation.
Gotcha.
Whereas if you're dealing with lecithin, it might look like a full encapsulation under a microscope, but it's not. It's just like the lipid monobilayer. So really, like the quality control is number one in the ingredient itself. Like that is core, and it's like a huge price difference, which is why we're costly. It's like, lecithin costs like $20 or $30 a kilo, and like we're spending like a lot more than that.
Yeah, interesting. How'd you end up with the formulation that you chose for the various ingredients? Because I was approached by another company that is relatively popular in Europe, where you can essentially you have like a menu. You got, I want a little of this, I want a little of that, which I understand the theory behind it. I think left to people's own devices, or even, to be honest, if you're asking physicians if in med school we had a course on pharmacology and supplement development, the answer is no. So like allowing me to figure out like what concentrations is probably not the best use of anyone's time. So like, how'd you end up choosing the ingredients that you chose? I understand where the mushrooms came from, which, by the way, I don't know if you knew this, like huge fan of mushrooms. Okay. I skew more towards the psychedelic side, but that's a personal decision. But ultimately as I have immersed myself in that world, appreciated the value of mushrooms of all types. And I hope some point relatively soon, we'll kind of change course and appreciate the value that they possess, and also that they've been literally right under our nose in the most
They're amazing.
significant volume of any substance on this planet since we've been here.
Yeah, mushrooms are incredible.
They're the best.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, because when I was growing up, like we just didn't eat a lot of vegetables, and whenever we had mushrooms, I was just like, these are not prepared well.
Because they're also the same like these boring bell mushrooms or whatever they are.
Yeah, portobellos, whatever.
Yeah.
Anywho, how'd you end up with the compounds that you chose? Because when people are, I'm just gonna like, the MCT oil, vitamin C, D3, B12, like, you could have chose anything to put in. Like, how'd you choose those?
Yeah, sure. And also just quickly on the mushrooms, like not all mushrooms are created equal, right? So we're using extracts, but we're using like the highest extracts you can find in the market. So our lion's mane is 40% concentrated beta glucans, right? 1316, chaga is 30%. And then we have a mushroom, which I don't think anyone else is using, which is Agaricus. Agaricus was recommended to me by one of our advisors, Dr. Paul Song, who's an oncologist. And he came across Agaricus 15, 20 years ago, and he has been giving it to cancer patients.
Interesting.
Yeah, and Agaricus is like one of the most studied in peer-reviewed literature for anti-tumor effects. So again, back to the 4 horsemen. If on a daily basis I can give my body anti-tumor support, like that's positive, right? For like long-term cancer, etc. So that's for the mushrooms. For the other ones, MCT oil is our oil base, right? So we actually make our oil solubles separately, our water solubles separately, then we bind them together. So it's a great base for, obviously it has like some ketosis benefits, theoretically, but it's just a good clean, fat. It's a good clean fat, right? So we use that for vitamin D and for quercetin. For quercetin we chose because we want a senolytic, right? And quercetin, like, and to be completely transparent, it's like this is a low soluble ingredient. Like, this is like I want to like practice transparency. It's like quercetin is the least soluble ingredient in our formula, right? Like it's only going to be somewhat solubilized, which is why we don't overdose it, because you're just going to be wasting money. In fact, this next batch we went from 120 milligrams to 100 milligrams now because this is not absorbing. So like, why give more of it, right? Like reduce it to give a better probability of absorption. We chose because we wanted to be a multi. We wanted to replace like your big powder bags. So that's why we did B12, vitamin C, D3. I think those 3 are like essential for daily use. Niacin for heart health and for an NAD precursor. What else? Taurine, an amazing amino acid, right? Taurine has been studied in mice. It actually elongated lifespan, and in monkeys, it elongated health span. Like it was a big study and big report in the New York Times a year ago on that. And again, it's not huge doses, but it's meant to just be, if you take this daily
for the rest of your life.
For the rest of your life, like you are supporting your body. And to your first point of the podcast, it's like you are supplementing your health. Right? Like the pillars of health: sleep, exercise. Emotional connection, which is like huge for me. Like last night I had friends over, drank wine, ate pasta, like great night. Not, let's say on paper your physician might say, oh, don't drink wine or stuff. No, like I'm totally a believer in living as good a life as possible, right?
We'll get into that one. But thanks for the invite, by the way. Not that I hadn't eaten anything in 48 hours, so I would have had to have abstained. But no, I get it. And I think that's the biggest. It's kind of one of the points that I hope people take from this is like, it doesn't have to be difficult. I have gotten to the point with my practice now here where I have had more than a handful of conversations with patients where I'm like, you know what? Like, instead of letting you continue to go down this like rabbit hole of like, should I take this peptide or this? I'm just like, I'm not going to do anything until you can prove to me that you are going to show up here 4 days a week. For more than 4 weeks at a time. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going, and that's my right. And, there are probably physicians who will tolerate that more. But ultimately, if this, as in, Monarch that we're sitting in, is the living embodiment of who I am, just as like your product is the embodiment of who you are,
right?
We can't sit here and just be like, let's continue to indulge your desires to continue to circumnavigate what ultimately you said, which is, if you take this the rest of your life, you have a great chance to support the things that you need to support
Right.
in your body, which at the end of the day are their own individualized organisms,
Right.
to work together, to vibrate, to resonate, and provide the greatest outcome, which for you is, hopefully a long, healthy, meaningful, productive life of, of helping humanity in whatever way that you were sent here to do that. And so, yeah, man, like it's nice to learn more about this, because inevitably, like, I get contacted by a lot of people that are trying to get a lot of things into our door, and getting to know more about the person, the genesis behind why they're doing what they're doing, and then also understanding, the mechanism of how it should hopefully work, I think is extremely important.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. Just on a personal note, like, I'd love to dive into more, like, the kind of like the emotional aspect of this. And I guess for you, like, what are the next phases of this company should you continue to be successful and this takes off? Like, what are other areas you'd like to go into with, the longevity supplement space?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think primarily, like, what really motivates me about the longevity space or the health space in general is I believe in celebrating life.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing I want to do, I want to add like a good voice to the space, because the last thing I want to do is make people feel afraid that if they don't do something, that they're all of a sudden going to be ill, their life's not going to be as good. Or the opposite, that if you take this, you're going to have the best life in the world, and you're going to cheat death and all this stuff, like all this nonsense, I actually want to use the brand as a platform to project the worldview. And the worldview is like, life is beautiful, life is magical, life is unique, and like celebrate it as fully as possible. And we're here to create products and services that support that.
Sure.
Like, we just want to support your health so that you can live as vibrantly for as long as possible.
Totally.
And like, that's the extent of the promise.
Same.
Right. And that's awesome. Like, that inspires me. That gets me up in the morning. Right. So, future products, I mean, like, with that canvas, it's broad, like, obviously more supplements, but like not a crazy amount, not just like throwing every supplement ingredient out there in the world, everything curated like this one. And, there's tech aspects we want to get into, like new ways of like looking at your life, holistically, that we're working on. And, really it's like, there's a lot of potential.
Do you foresee any challenges in obtaining the volume of ingredients that would be necessary to go nationwide, worldwide, things like that? Because I've advised some other groups throughout the years, and one of the rate limiting steps is like, once you hit a certain volume, like, it's hard to, whether it's the manufacturing side or even just like the sourcing side, because it seems that healthy items run in short supply,
right.
And then you have delays in production, which can impact momentum. So has that come up? Have you guys thought about that? Is that a concern for you as you continue to grow?
Yeah, not at this stage. At this stage, we have great suppliers that seem to have plentiful supply, so we haven't hit a roadblock yet. That being said, we just really launched in November. It was 7 months ago.
Yeah.
So we haven't even had the demand to scale as something that would hit that wall. But I feel confident that, one is because we own the manufacturing process, meaning like, in the supplement space, usually the manufacturer will create the product for you. And then they usually even control the supply chain of ingredients.
Sure.
So you don't even know how they source it, where they're sourcing it from, et cetera. Like, we source our own ingredients. We own our own intellectual property on how we manufacture. So, future steps would be to manufacture ourselves versus, use, co-manufacturing. And we have already a diversified supply chain.
Sure.
So we have different redundancy in our supply chain. So it'll be a good problem to have if we get to that place. Yeah,
that's great. Within the last few moments, I like to ask all the guests, end of days, when you're wrapping things up here on this planet, what's the mark that you hope to leave with the work, whether with its Tomorrow Longevity or whatever else you do? What do you hope your lasting impact on our planet will be?
That's a good question.
You can take your time.
Yeah.
I can continue to fill.
Yeah. I think it's always been me, and I think as you age, one of the benefits of growing up is that you actually have, for some reason, more courage just to be yourself. And I think the person I've always been is I value human beings. I really do, and I want that to extend as far as possible. So like whatever the company is or anyone I come across, it's like I want the world to feel like closer to itself, less fearful, more courageous, more living in its own agency, having its own thoughts, its own feelings, and it's like just out of the fear zone,
Totally.
know, right? And explore, be curious.
I could not agree more. I felt for a long time that I've always felt different. And to your point, like I'm almost 40 years old now, which is crazy to say. And I feel like I'm just starting to figure out like what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And part of that is, tangential to what you said, which is allowing humans to return to their authentic divine blueprint, which is ultimately like we have all the answers.
Right.
We know what we need to do. The question is will we take the time to really reflect and have that introspection, one, to figure out like why we're here. And then the other part is, will we allow the vessel that's carrying all of those, intangible components to be healthy enough that it will function, vibrate, resonate, connect with other people. Like at the end of the day, all we are is energy. You walk into the room and you can get a pretty good idea, like, is that a good person or not?
Right.
How do you quantify that? Well, you can't. It's a feeling.
Right.
It's that energy. So, it's beautiful to come across people who are walking the same path, fighting the same battle. And it's something for me that's beautiful because I've recognized like I can't do this alone, just like you can't do this alone.
Right.
I need you just as much as you need me.
Right.
And that's beautiful. That's how nature works. Like everything's in perfect balance. So super excited. I love the product. I need to get more. So we'll figure that one out so I can start slamming that, especially now since my slate is clean and I'm finally feeling like a human being again. And I'm excited for not only our population, but hopefully other people to start enjoying this as well. And, adding a sachet, as you say, a sachet a day.
A sachet a day. Yeah.
So thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We will see you guys soon.